And if we break this down, it's an extreme circumstance where the rug is pulled out from under you. Everything is unstable. You are in the unknown. Holla, holla, shot caller. What's up, sisters? Today I want to talk about why you're so indecisive. This is something that I struggled with for such a long time. Literally from sitting there and staring every trip. I would get my suitcase out with dread and I would push it to last minute because I knew the experience that it was going to be. I hate packing. I could never decide on what to bring. So then I bring everything and now I have too much and then my bag's too heavy. Hello, Miss Ellie. So it was from little things like that to being indecisive about, what do I want to do right now? Do I want to shower and then eat, or do I want to eat and then shower? And I would stand there and freeze for 30 seconds until I just picked one. And those were the little things, all the way up to the extremes of being in an abusive relationship and telling myself, I'm going to leave. And then I wouldn't leave. Or even when it got to the point of telling that person, I can't do this anymore, I'm going to leave. And then I wouldn't. And it was that indecision. It was so painful because I would just sit there in panic of, I don't know what to do. And it's not that you don't know what to do. Your gut knows what to do, even with the little decisions, especially with the big decisions. It's that you have the self-doubt and that you don't believe in yourself enough to make that decision and to execute it. You don't trust yourself to initially do it or to follow through with it. And so the issue that I had, especially with saying that I was going to leave an abusive relationship, I said I was going to, so I dropped that boundary, and then my follow through was never there. Because then the next thing was, now I got to create more conflict, and there's all of this friction because I have to pack up all of my things. I have to figure out where I'm going to go. I don't have any money. And if you look at indecision and where it stems from, you can probably find examples all throughout your life. I remember when I got my first job out of PT school, I would be so anxiety ridden in certain social situations. I remember there was a patient who, she had this pair of cowboy boots and she had 2 pairs. And she was like, I really want to give them to you. And I was like, oh my gosh, I would love them, but I can't. I remember the TPTA said something about somebody lost their license for accepting a gift and I can't. And I remember that being such an emotional roller coaster that I spent so long crying about it because I didn't want to hurt her feelings. So I said yes, and I took them, but then I didn't know what to do with them. And it was like the telltale heart. And I felt like I had to hide them or bury them or trash them because I was so insecure with myself. I was so insecure with the decision that I had made, and I had done it to try to people please, to not hurt someone else. But in the process, I was giving myself all of this conflict. And it was because I had such self-doubt, such limiting beliefs. And that is something that is a deep wound that has been ingrained over time. And then when a situation, when somebody pings it, it freaking explodes. And that's where we have these spirals. And the thing I want to talk about indecision is it's not just failing to make a decision. It's not just the lack of self-worth, the lack of self-trust, the self-doubt. It's self-abandonment. When I didn't leave an abusive relationship, I was abandoning myself. I was abandoning my safety physically and mentally and emotionally. In situations like that, you are abandoning yourself. When I was sexually assaulted, that was self-abandonment. It was because I was sitting there trying to people please, trying to avoid conflict, and I was sitting there undecided as everything was happening. I could leave right now. I don't want to create conflict. I could leave right now. And that's what this looks like when it just plays over and over throughout your life in patterns. And so then you continuously draw in these situations when really it's the world that we're creating with our perceptions, and it's the way that we behave, the way that we interact with the world. I could have reacted completely differently in any of those situations and not abandoned myself and not gone through that spiral had I trusted myself, had I believed in myself, had I leaned into my voice. I spent years minimizing my needs so that other people would feel less uncomfortable. I waited for permission. I looked to others for validation. That's another big one, always needing external validation. And I remember, especially with trying to make other people feel uncomfortable, there's a wound that I have had my entire life, and it was inappropriate. And it goes back to mother-father wounds. And if you don't know what those are, it's the wounds that we develop from our mother or from our father based on the way that they were behaving, the way that they treated us, and our response to it. And it's not that mother or father was bad. It's not that you were bad. It's that something happened and we created a perception of something being too much or not enough, in the words of Lewis Huxtable. And I can remember, for me, with inappropriate, I felt like there were times where one of my parents would do something that I considered out of line or not appropriate, not something that would be approved of. And I had another parent who was uptight, never let their hair down, and everything was acceptable. At least that's the way I perceived it. I felt like I had to be in line. I felt like I had to be good. I felt like I had to behave, to not step out of line. And it was this self-created container based on the way that I was perceiving my relationship and my experience with my parents. And so then getting into intimate relationships. And so then now looking back at all of that, I was looking at the wounds that were continuing to show up and create patterns in my life. And it was me. I was judging inappropriate in so many people in so many situations when, one, people are just being themselves. But I had spent a lifetime trying to make other people around me feel less uncomfortable when I perceived someone else to be inappropriate. And so I was abandoning myself. I was judging this person. I was being inappropriate to them by not letting them be themselves. And I was assuming that everybody else felt a certain way and trying to minimize the blow. And the craziest part is that my whole life, I thought I was doing good. I thought everybody else was on the same wavelength as me. I thought everybody else had this aversion to inappropriate jokes or to weird and creepy. And I thought I had to butt in, and I thought I had to fix the situation. And all of these things started overlapping. The indecision, the lack of self-worth, the relation to inappropriate, the wanting to jump in and fix things, the wanting to control, the need for external validation, the self-abandonment. Oh my gosh, they all just layer and layer and layer. And so then by the time we get to be adults, we have all of these traumas, all of these wounds wrapped in with a pretty bow, and it's in our heart. And we wonder why we react so strongly to certain things. But the bigger question that I want to challenge you with is, what are the things that you're not seeing? Because the years of self-abandonment where I was just indecisive, that wasn't a huge reaction. I wouldn't have been able to say, oh gosh, why did I do that out of nowhere? It was happening often. It was this negative little voice in my head. It was this anxiety, and I didn't sit there and reflect on, that was an interesting thought. Why did I feel that? So what moments do you have? What situations in your life are you behaving or thinking or reacting in a way that's not in line with your deepest, truest self, the one that doesn't have any of those wounds, where if you took that trauma ball that's wrapped with a ribbon out of your chest, who would you be? How would you be? So we'll bring this back around the abusive relationship and to the indecision, where I said that I was going to leave and then I didn't. So knowing all of that in the past and then arriving at this relationship, by the time I entered, the wounds were already there. The gaslighting just turned up the volume on the behavior that I had, on the thoughts, on the little negative voices, on the self-doubt, the fawning, the freeze response, the wanting to maintain peace, silencing myself. That got stronger after a lifetime of doing that just to keep the peace, a lifetime of doing that to not upset anybody, to be appropriate, to not cause conflict. And I completely abandoned my voice. The silence got louder. So what happens in a relationship like that? It's not all bad. You've heard me talk about the thing that nobody talks about, and it's that there is no duality. People aren't exclusively good or exclusively bad. It's a gray area. And in an abusive or toxic relationship, there's good times, and then there's bad times, and there's really, really bad times. But then when things settle down, a lot of the times things go right back to suddenly being good again. And in many instances, there's this selective forgetfulness or amnesia of the person who's doing all of this behavior. And then the person who's in the way of the fire is like, do I bring this up and cause another fight? Or do I just suppress my emotions and I let it go because things are good now and I want peace? And I went with that one a lot. But it's this variable schedule of positive reinforcement. The good moments keep you hooked. You don't know when the bad moments are coming, and when they're bad, they freaking explode. But every so often you get that hit, that validation, that breadcrumb, and you think, oh, it's not so bad. Maybe I am just too sensitive. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I am remembering it wrong. And it's just enough that you question yourself over and over again every time, even though it's happened tens, hundreds of times. It makes you question yourself. And then when you are habitually questioning yourself after every one of those times, now look back at that trauma ball, that self-doubt, that lack of self-worth, that what do I deserve in love? How do I deserve to be treated? That has now continued snowballing, and now your trauma ball is so much bigger. And we have all of these other things entangled in there. And let's go even further. Now we can start looking at the physical and the mental symptoms. You can start getting physically sick. Your body is putting you in survival mode, so you might start forgetting things because you're so amped up with your nervous system. You're trying to protect yourself. You're in fight or flight all the time that you don't have time to remember all of these things. And so you just start absorbing what they told you. I remember in my last relationship, going in and being able to recall a lot of my childhood, being able to recall the things that I had struggled with, particularly with my dad in my childhood. And I was also able to recall my previous relationship. And at the end of my last relationship, I couldn't recall much about my childhood. I remember the things that I told myself about the things that I had struggled with my dad, but I don't actually remember it. And beats me, like I don't even really remember my prior relationship. And I had talked to my therapist, I had looked on the internet, and I was like, my memory is getting worse. I think I have a memory problem. I think something's wrong with me. And it's the body trying to protect you. That's a response because it's just shutting out anything that can potentially give you pain. But that's how the cycle traps you. It minimizes the hurt. Maybe you don't remember it. You get the little breadcrumbs. You get that positive reinforcement. You start increasing the self-doubt. You're already have this huge trauma ball in your chest. And so then what? Now you're supposed to have this big aha moment where you're like, I'm finally going to stand up for myself and I'm going to leave. And then I'm going to do it. And there's moments, I would say there's moments where I felt like during the fight, every fight, I was like, I don't deserve this. This isn't right. This isn't okay. And I would be lucid and I would decide I was going to leave. I would write myself a note. I would write down what was happening. And then afterwards, when things were back to normal, things were re-explained back to me. And I was like, oh my God, I was emotional. Like I can see where I went wrong. And it was so much of the gaslighting, so much. But it just beat down my confidence over time. And so I never left. And the way that I actually left was one day it got so bad that I was packing my things during a fight. And he said, fine, be out by 4. And he left. And I remember sitting in the room crying, and I hadn't cried in forever. I was panicked. I didn't know what to do. I was indecisive. I was like, do I stay? I've stayed before. But if I stay, it's going to continue to be like this. And I called my cousin and I just cried and I was like, I don't know why I'm calling you. I just don't know what to do. And if they hadn't come that day, I would have stayed. By them coming, that was breaking into a new path. There was no going back. We got a moving truck. There was no going back. They helped me get all of my things out. There was no going back. And even through all of that, I had self-doubt. I questioned myself. The next day, I was in a spiral. I questioned myself. I thought I was the crazy one. I was being told I was the crazy one, that I made big emotional decisions. And my trauma ball was on fire. And if we break this down, it's an extreme circumstance where the rug is pulled out from under you. Everything is unstable. You are in the unknown. You don't believe in yourself. You have self-doubt. Somebody's telling you all of these mean things and you've relied on external validation. And so you absorb the good and the bad from people. So whatever people tell you, it just gets absorbed like a beam directly into your body. And it was bad because I was like, who am I now? I had to recreate. But those moments are some of the most powerful. They kick us out of the loop, especially when you put yourself in a position where you can't go back, because it puts you in a position to look at yourself, to look inward. And that was the beginning of finally understanding this whole trauma ball. That was the beginning of, first I had to sit with it. It was on fire and I wanted to fucking die. And so you sit with it, you let it flow through you. You have to feel it. And then you take the bow off and you start untangling and addressing the traumas one by one. And slowly that ball gets smaller and you can realize some of those strands that are in that trauma ball have run so deep that they extend out to the surface, but they go all the way to the core. And those are your oldest, strongest, biggest ones. Everybody has a trauma ball. If you react, if you cry, if you are indecisive, if you have a lack of self-worth, you're not weak. And I'll speak directly to the people who have similar wounds to the ones that I've identified that have run so deep for me. You're not weak. You've been trained to silence your truth, to protect you, to keep you safe, to keep you from getting more hurt. Your low confidence, your self-doubt has created these big beliefs about yourself that are narrating your entire life, that are keeping you from doing the thing that you want to do, that are keeping you from believing in yourself to live this incredible life. You keep calling back in your trauma. You keep building your trauma ball. Healing is coming home to your own voice and believing it with such conviction that the ground shakes. You can no longer question yourself like you did before. You have to practice listening to your gut and listening to it. You have to trust that you know enough to act, to execute, even when it's scary and even when it changes everything. I'm so grateful for the leaps and the changes and the holding my fireball. I'm so grateful for all of it. That huge pivot, that entire life change, my work change, my living situation change, my relationship change, moving across the country twice. I'm so grateful for that one thing that caused all of these cascade of events, because if that hadn't happened, nothing else would have. You are not indecisive. You've just spent a lifetime thinking that your truth isn't safe, and that ends now. So believe in yourself. Look for your ball of trauma. See what you can identify. See what you can tease out. See what you can feel, what you can understand. That's taking the wild way home to yourself.